Rolling.
Rolling. Get over here.
Coming. Guess where guess where we came from?
Dun, da, 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 da.
Lisboa.
Portugal.
Lisbon, Lisboa.
Portugal.
So what did you why did we go to Lisbon?
Well, we went to Lisbon and Porto, but the reason why we went to Portugal, it's a country on our list of countries to tour, and it's also been a country that we've heard so many great things about for retirement, for travelers, for expats, a warm, friendly, inexpensive European country. So we decided to go check it out. It's along the Atlantic Ocean. Someday I'd like to sail more, and so this made a good logical destination for us to go spend some time.
We flew out of SFO, San Francisco, and it was a direct flight to Lisbon, which is great. It was a long flight, about almost 11 hours, 10 hours, 55 minutes or so from San Francisco to Lisbon.
TAP Airlines. We chose TAP Airlines, which is the airline of Portugal, TAP. We chose it because of a direct nonstop flight. That really was making a difference in the travel time and the amount of sitting around time. So using a direct flight really helped, I think, in the overall trip.
I agree. You know, it's air travel, not the funnest thing in the world, especially if it's more than an hour or 30 minutes even. When we flew over Lisbon, I noticed right away that there were a lot of boxy buildings all over the place, and that seemed to be the main architectural direction that the city planners went with. There weren't any super tall skyscrapers, or not like what you see in London, Berlin, New York.
And light colored. So on this trip, we decided to rent a car. It was part of our travel package. So we rented a small compact car. It was just the two of us. We didn't have a lot to carry. B, with the small, narrow streets, I really wanted a small car. I am so glad we had a small car. Wow, were those streets narrow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we had no idea. You know, I didn't do too much research before this trip. He did. He looked at more videos on YouTube, but the reality of it was we stayed in the part of town called Alfama, which is the oldest part of Lisbon, and the streets are like super narrow.
Sidewalks, practically.
Yeah, they're glorified sidewalks, and only the narrow cars can fit. You know, no sedans, and I think, you know, because it's such an old part of town, they had no idea that cars were gonna take over the world. Now they only had horses, and people walked all over the place. And one of the things too is a lot of cobblestone or tiled streets and sidewalks. When you do a lot of walking, make sure you wear the appropriate shoes, because otherwise your heel or your stilettos will get stuck in the middle.
Yeah,
and
we had to really we couldn't wear the stilettos on this trip.
Yeah, and it was a little hard to sightsee, look at admire the tile facades of the buildings, and keep looking at where you're going so you don't trip and fall. But I think that is a rite of passage when you go to Lisbon, is tripping and falling, I guess, is what I've heard somebody say before.
But that little rental car, going back to it, it was not a car I'd go out and buy, but it was a functional little car, but it had standard transmission, which we both have driven standard transmission, but it's been a little while. So we had a few stall outs and a few extra revs and a few jerky motions.
Yeah, wrong gear.
Putting in
the wrong gear.
A couple of those things, but you know, you get accustomed to it. And that's a real hilly town. So you're combining hilly streets, cobblestone streets, super narrow streets with an unfamiliar car and in a different language. So you're trying to read street signs, trying to navigate, and they use lots of roundabouts, which are great, But roundabouts have a provision of you got to know where your exit is and which lane to be in to get into the exit. So they're not all single lane roundabouts, and sometimes you're in the wrong lane and you need to make a quick jet to the right to exit, or safely you go around the roundabout again.
Another thing that kind of frustrated him, especially, he drove a lot more in the city versus I did. I drove more in the highways. The street lights are up high, but then they're like right here. They're not across the street, kind of like what we have here in America, where you have one set of street lights here right next to the car, but then also up ahead. So it was hard to see when your light was green.
If you were first at the line, stop line, whatever they call that.
Yeah. Stoplight.
Stoplight. If you're first to line, first car to line, you can barely see the street light to your right. You kind of have to keep looking at it because there's nothing in front of you. I did learn a trick that if you look for look at the crosswalk signs, it'll flash yellow and then go red, then the green. So the alternate crosswalk sign is the trigger, and I started kind of watching that more commonly. But it took a little while, and it is a bit of a nuisance. You really don't want to be first in the line because you can't see the street light.
Mm-hmm. And another reason why we rented the car was because we were going to go to Porto as well. Little did we know that, and here's a pro tip, you don't need a car in Lisbon to rent because there's public transportation. There are Ubers there, tuk-tuks, taxis, and you can take the train. You can take the train from the different cities. And we forgot the train systems in Europe, where they're a lot more extensive than here in America. So I think that's why we rented a car, because we could have gone to Porto the same amount of time in a train as we did in a car.
So we found this really quaint Airbnb, reasonably priced, beautifully done, right in the heart of Alfama. But the apartment itself, very cute, up all the way, very sharp set of stairs.
And the highlight of it was the balcony overlooking the river, Teja River, and we could see the rooftops, so we were pretty high up. And then on the opposite side of the building was looking up at one of the hills in Lisbon to a couple of churches or cathedrals, which is also nice.
Yeah, beautiful view. And bougainvilleas in the back. So with those views, we did find the apartment well appointed. It had the things we needed, cookware and refrigerator, stove, and all those kinds of things. It was not a huge space. It was comfortable. Kitchen, dining room, living room, small living room, and then a nice sized bedroom. The bedroom was really the featured room with a balcony that overlooked the city and the courtyard. But from a functionality, very, very workable, very easy to be in. It gave us a little bit of separate space. I think this is the other one.
We are taking a night tour in the streets of Alfama in Lisbon. One of the things around Alfama, which was great, was it's a small neighborhood, as we mentioned, and then each little corner takes you to a set of stairs or another, I don't know, narrow street. And in these streets are hidden like restaurants. Some of them are not clearly marked, but like when they have tables outside, it's the very European setting where you have tables and umbrellas outside and people eat. I've just found it really charming. When you go into these restaurants, they're super narrow and super small. Where we stayed at the Airbnb, even literally right around the corner was a little cafe where we had breakfast a couple of times. So everything was super convenient in this area. There was a little market that we went to, also a couple of restaurants right around our doorstep.
And we would kind of nose in and around places and look at the menus. And we were also told, and I've known this, that most of the time in European countries, they tend to eat later for the evening meal. So it's a 8, 9, 10 o'clock outing instead of a 5, 6 o'clock. So we knew that, and so we were out bumming around the streets and looking for opportunities and just kind of exploring, not really sure. And so we picked a little restaurant called Casa dos Amigos.
Casa dos Amigos.
Yeah, lots of sh in the Portuguese language. Casa dos Amigos. Cute little restaurant serving more tapas and Portuguese light food.
Although what we had was on the heavier side.
We didn't pick the light stuff on the menu.
Yeah. And the funny thing about this was, so there are restaurants in Alfama area where they have their folks working like, come in, eat here, you know, those kind of things to lure the tourists in. Yeah. And then this guy, poor guy, he was by himself. And I think we noticed that he really was the only one running the place that night. He was the doorman, the server,
the
bartender, and the cook.
The cook, and the busboy, and the dishwasher.
He was everything.
He did it all.
One-man show.
Very pleasant gentleman, very, very helpful.
Yeah. And we were the only two that ate at that place
at
that time.
Yeah.
And then we're next couple doors down, we could hear folks singing some pop songs on a guitar, accompanied by a guitar. On the second day, we wanted to explore some of the city. We took the car out, and I wanted to go to Belém, and you know, we drove down the main avenue along the river. There was a turn, an intentional turn, because we didn't know exactly where to go. So we took this turn, and it took us north somewhere. We got to see the aqueduct, and we stopped, and then we went to the Lidl and by the zoo. I thought it was the gardens, but it was a zoo, so I wasn't interested in going to the zoo. And we just kind of walked around a little bit in that area, and then on the way back down, we thought we could exit the highway to go back to the main avenue down by the river. But instead we crossed the bridge, the famous bridge that looks like Golden Gate Bridge. It's the 25th of April, Ponte 25 de Abril, which is in commemoration of the revolution in 1974 that overthrew the previous regime. And then that was fine, you know. One of the mottos that he lives by is explore, you know, freely. We didn't have any appointments, so I just went with it. And then we saw on the other side of the bridge, on the bank of the river, the Cristo Rei, this huge monument of Christ. And so we wanted to check it out. We didn't really know how to get there, so this took another, 45 minutes of driving.
Journey. Yeah.
Looking for the Cristo Rei, it's what it's called. And so we went west, all the way west, trying to look for a road to get back to the monument, and then
we've wound around some more narrow streets and little port towns and marinas and things like that, which was interesting to see.
Yeah. And eventually we wound up at Cristo Rei, and it was a pretty magnificent structure. Wow. You could go up to the top of it and, you know, have great views of the city, 360-degree views. And that statue was just massive. Anna, who was the owner of the Airbnb, she recommended a couple of restaurants for us to try out where the locals eat. And one of them was Santa Maria dos Cogumelos, which is all of their menu items have mushroom in it.
Featured in mushrooms.
Yeah, so I was super excited to go try it out. And it's right near the Pantheon, the National Pantheon in the Santa Maria area. And, you know, we didn't know, some places, a lot of restaurants do close between like 3 and 7 or 4 and 7. So another tip here is that if you're looking to go to another a restaurant, is to make sure you know their hours and if they take reservations, because when we got to Santa Maria dos Cogumelos, we got there, I was super excited right at 7:30 when they opened, and then the hostess said, excuse me, do you have a reservation? And we were like, no. And she goes, well, we're full for the night. Try calling us next week, maybe, is what she said. So I was super disappointed. And then, but we went to another place in the list that Anna gave us. Shout out to Ishmael, who was our server. And
He was fantastic.
And we were lucky because there was one open table.
Yeah.
For
two seats.
Yeah, for 2 seats. And then they cleared out everybody for their 9 p.m. shift. It was called Taberna Sal Grosso. And they served tapas.
Small plates.
Yeah, and amazing food. And I would recommend that as well.
Wow, food was incredible. Good mixtures, and we ordered a number of different small plates, not just a couple of small plates. I think they were a little bit impressed with, or surprised about how much of different things we ordered.
Yeah.
Like we ordered all 3 of the desserts.
Oh, that's right.
We ordered a number of different mains. They were all small mains, but we like to share food, and so we will order something and each try a different dish, and really oh my gosh, incredible foods.
Yeah. And this was another one of those small settings. And it's very, what do you call it, intimate.
Yeah, super intimate, super cozy.
Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, it was definitely a highlight restaurant. I'd go back there. I'd fly there to go back there. That's how good a restaurant that was.
Wow, really?
Same with the Cogomels, Santa Maria Cogomels. Both those were incredible experiences.
Wow, great. Yeah.